very honored to have as our first guest on our time back an author who has a book coming out, and it's a New York native, Nick Hirshon, who used to write for the Daily News, and he's a professor with a degree in journalism, and he's used to write for the New York Daily News, and he had one book out on Nassau Coliseum, and he has a second book coming out called Images of America, Forest Hills, and he will be the guest speaker this month, Wednesday, February 27th, at 1 p.m. at the Woodhaven Cultural and Historical Society at Emanuel Church. That's on 91st Avenue, Woodhaven Boulevard. And we're very honored to have Nick Hirshon join us tonight. And did that right, Nick? Are you there?
Yes. Hey, Ed. How are you?
Great, Nick. How you doing, man?
Very good. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, thanks for calling in. So now your book comes out Monday. Is that correct?
That's right. February 18th, this upcoming Monday.
Wow. How exciting is it to have something to have a book coming out? This is your second book. How is the excitement the same as the first time? How's it feel?
Certainly. I mean, it's a long process, so you're talking of months and months of research and writing, and then starting with promotion, figuring out where it's going to be sold and all the signings, and then when it actually comes up, it's really exciting to see how people are going to receive it. I've been talking to people about this since last April when the book was accepted by the publisher. So, now people actually get to look at it, and of course you're a little nervous about is it going to meet their expectations, but also excited to see what they want to say,
Uh-huh. So the picture, obviously, being the title, images, I'm assuming that that's got a lot of photographs in it, which people are always interested in seeing old photographs, especially of their neighborhoods, of where they grew up. Why do you think people are so fascinated with seeing old pictures of locations where they once grew up?
I think it's interesting because a lot of people who might say that they're not interested in history and it never really got to them before, but once they see an old photograph, like you said, of the school they used to go to, whether it's elementary, high school, college, where they used to work, just where they lived, if they've moved away or something else, it just strikes something in them, and maybe there was always that curiosity. And especially in Forest Hills, there are a lot of these buildings that have remained the same for decades and almost a century in a lot of cases, but their uses have changed throughout those years. So it's kind of fun to see that building, and you'll immediately see the photo and say, yep, that's where such and such business is. I know it right now, but then it was totally different, but it still looks so similar that you can place it immediately. We have a few photos in the book of, like, the intersection of Austin Street and Continental Avenue, and the buildings are pretty much entirely the same, but, of course, now it's Cohen's Fashion Optical and Citibank, and back then it was totally different uses, and you can see, like, all the old cool signs there, so I think I guess it connects with those people in a way that maybe they weren't expecting.
Yeah, it really is. To me, it's fascinating. I know I've had the experience looking at old photographs in Woodhaven here, how buildings become personalities in the tale of a community, and it's the curve of a building, the way the brick formation, the way the windows appear. Even in some cases, I found it was very interesting. Some of the old photos on Jamaica Avenue, that in the old days the photos weren't so good because it was very hard to take pictures of that part of Jamaica Avenue because it was very dark, and whenever the sun was out, it was usually in your face. And it's that way today, and it was that way so many years ago. Yeah, you're right. It connects you to the past, seeing these gateways, things that were the same then and the same now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I think it's really that even if people don't feel a connection to the building, it evokes some sort of a memory in them. So it's more that you remember Eddie's Sweet Shop because that's where you went on your first date. Or you remember that time you and your buddies went to a movie at the Forest Hill Theater, which isn't around anymore, and that makes you kind of long for it. So I think it's a lot of those things that we don't necessarily feel an attachment to any building, but it's more of we always associate it with a certain person or a time in our lives, and that's why it's become so special to people.
Now, let me ask: did you grow up in that area in Forest Hills?
Yep.
Okay.
Grew up here, lived here my whole life in Forest Hills.
All right. So in doing the research for this, did you come across any things that like really shocked you or surprised you? Something you learned?
Actually, a few people have asked me that, and the thing that I always mention is there was a restaurant on Queens Boulevard known as Topsy's Cabin, and I found some old photographs of it, mostly postcards. And, it wasn't that unusual to have a postcard promoting a restaurant back in the day, so I didn't make much of it. But I noticed that the logo for it seemed very politically incorrect because it appeared to show, like, the face of an African-American person in a way that you normally wouldn't want associated with it. And I was looking into the history of that restaurant, and I thought, in Forest Hills, which is in a liberal city, you wouldn't have something like that. And it's a restaurant that opened in the late 1930s on Queens Boulevard, where the Pinnacle building is now, for those people who might know where that is, like an office and apartment complex. And, it was around until into the 1960s. And a lot of political movers and shakers had big events there. But the background of it really shocked me because it had that logo, and it was named after a character from Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Wow.
And it had murals on the wall of Southern plantations, and the wait staff was entirely African-American. And the offerings on the menu were all kind of Southern food, and a lot of things, again, that were derogatory or kind of maybe slightly veiled, thinly veiled derogatory nature, and yet it existed in, the 30s. This wasn't like in the 1800s that this was around. We're talking about like the 1930s into the 1960s, so that really shocked me that it existed.
Holy smokes! Now, during the 60s, was it the focus of any, protests or any controversy?
I was wondering that too, and I didn't see anything like that. In fact, I saw a lot of people who were bigwigs still having events there, and like the local Kiwanis and the local Lions Club or whatever, like doing their events at Topsy's, and people like watching the election results come in at Topsy's and all of that. So,
wow,
not really. And I posted a few photos onto the Facebook page for the book, where I've been getting a lot of like Forest Hills residents, past and present, commenting, and I wondered what the reaction would be. I was worried that some people might be offended and I'd have to take it down or whatever. So I was really cautious in how I worded the caption. But then most of the people who posted, everybody, no one seemed to be offended, or at least they didn't say so. They were all just excited, and they said, I remember they had the best chicken, and they had great corn fritters and all of that stuff. So I haven't seen anything about any protests that were held there.
Yeah, it was a much different time. So now speaking of the photographs, you amass. You need to amass a large number of photographs for a book like this. How do you go about gathering them and then getting the rights to use them?
Well, that's the most challenging part about this, is because you want to go in with a certain narrative. There are certain events, people, places that you want to include, but it's really dependent on the photos that are available. You can't just pick the places that you want. So I knew a few local sources that I was going to try to hit up. I went to Community Board 6 on Metropolitan Avenue, and the district manager there, Frank Lucio, was very generous, and he gave me access to all of their photos, which had been archived in the past by Jeff Gottlieb from Central Historical Association. So they had terrific images that they let me use for free. I went to the Forest Hills Gardens Corporation and had a similar experience with them, where they have an archive going back to the beginning of the corporation in like 1908 or 1909. So they had all old newsletters and photos, and that was just stupendous, and something that I definitely didn't come across at the Nassau Coliseum book, having those kinds of outlets. But still, I had to go to some other archives where you have to pay. The photograph that's on the cover of the book, which shows Theodore Roosevelt speaking at Station Square in 1917, came from Harvard University, from their library. And when you're going into a library archive, you need to pay them for it. So that all comes into play too. And I got them from a variety of other sources as well. There's stuff in there from the Queensboro Public Library and a bunch of other places. So you kind of mix and match. You don't want to lose the quality of the book just based on cost. But at some point, of course, you can't just go all out and be spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars.
Sure. You got to strike that. You got to strike that balance.
Yeah.
You know, I noticed in your bio there it said you spent some time writing for the Queen's Ledger, which is now I don't know if it did when you were working there. One of its newspapers is the Leader Observer here in Woodhaven.
Mm-hmm.
And and you know, not too long ago, I recently had this experience, and you'll appreciate this. I was in the basement of Leonora Lavin, who was the former president of the Woodhaven Historical Society. And as I was walking out of the basement, I was picking up some stuff. I saw a book on a shelf, and it was a big, thick, bound black book, and it said The Leader Observer, 1979. Mm-hmm. And I looked at it, and I said, Leonora, is that what I think it is? And she said, yeah, that's the Leader Observer. I said, that's a whole year's worth of Leader Observers? And she says, yeah. And I said, oh my God, can I borrow it? And she said, you can have it. I mean, you're taking over the society from me. You can have it. I'm like, okay. And she says, do you want the rest of them? And I said,
there's the rest
of them. So I ended up getting like 1973 to 1985, mm-hmm. and going through these, you know, these newspapers, every page, every issue for a number of years is just a tremendous opportunity. And you know, it really strikes me that a lot of these smaller local papers like that, which have so much history of Queens in our area, it would be wonderful to see them, you know, eventually placed online somehow for people to see.
Sure. I mean, it would be terrific if they were digitized. You're right that, you know, I was looking when I was doing a lot of this research at old copies of the New York Times that are available online, because the New York Times has its entire database going back to like 1851 available to researchers online, so it's terrific. But of course, they weren't covering Queens or certainly Forest Hills as extensively as the local newspapers would be, the Queens Chronicle, the Courier, the Tribune, and all the others that are, you know, the Ledger, like you said, Times Ledger. So it would be great to see some of their records, and I'm sure they had much better photos in some cases and just insight on events, like you mentioned the Topsies protest. There may well
mm-hmm.
have been a protest at Topsies, but it just happened to not be covered by the New York Times or one of the other few sources that I was able to check easily online. You know, even some of the big established newspapers like the Post and the Daily News, it's not really easy to see their old issues online. But I think that we're sort of moving in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be great if the local papers did that.
Yeah, it's definitely a real untapped resource in our local history, and you know, I hope we can move in that direction. I know with what I have here, I've had some brief conversations with some folks from the Queens Library about heading in that direction, even for the small collection we have here. Mm-hmm. So what's your schedule like next week now? Now that you're getting started with this, the book's coming out. What kind of appearances do you have?
Well, we start off a little bit slow. I mean, of course, the book itself is coming out on Monday, so it should be available. People who have pre-ordered it will be getting them very shortly. You can get it right now at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And my first appearance is at your Historical Society on February 27th.
Wow. That's great. We're very honored. That's terrific.
So you contact me early, and that'll be my first one. And then I have a few others coming up at the Richmond Hill Historical Society. That's going to be in April. In March, before that, I'll be at the Queens Historical Society in Flushing. And we're working on a bunch of things in Forest Hills as we speak. So some of that happens a little bit after the release. You know, you're going to start figuring everything out. But the hope is to do at least a few in Forest Hills, and the publisher was just speaking to people today who own businesses and might be interested in something. That's
terrific. Well, listen, Nick, we wish you the best of luck with the book. I wish you all the success, and really look for. Have you already started planning your next book?
Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Okay.
No, honestly, you always, I guess, are thinking about that, and as you're exploring one neighborhood, you start to like cross into another neighborhood, or you come across a certain community or just a certain place that would be great for one of those books. Like my last one was on Nassau Coliseum, so it doesn't necessarily have to be on an entire neighborhood, but it could just be like an arena. Like you could easily do one, honestly. I don't know, I'm giving away this idea, but you could totally do one on just the West Side Tennis Club within Forest Hills. And there's so many different parts of just Forest Hills or the other surrounding neighborhoods or anything. So, of course, you're always thinking about what's out there and how can you do it. But, you know, for now I'm just really curious to see how Forest Hills receives this book. Hopefully they enjoy it, and that'll kind of dictate what else is done.
That's great. Well, listen, again, we wish you all the success in the world, and look forward to seeing you at our meeting this month. And everyone's real excited and looking forward to it. And, you know, again, thanks for calling, and, you know, good luck.
Thank you very much, Ed. Have a good night.
All right, Nick. Thanks a lot.
Take care.